Have you ever felt like nothing is ever enough? Like no matter what you achieve, there's a silent emptiness that keeps echoing inside you. You try to fill it with goals, love, pleasure, distractions, but it always returns, quiet and heavy. That feeling, it's not random, it's not weakness, it's a message, a signal from your soul that something deeper is out of alignment. Schopenhauer saw this truth before most dared to speak it. He understood what few are willing to admit, that behind our routines, our smiles, our ambitions, there's an invisible hunger driving everything, a mystical force, ancient and relentless, pulling us through life without ever truly satisfying us. This isn't just philosophy, it's the very structure of your existence, and if you don't see it clearly, you'll keep chasing illusions forever. But what if this pain you carry isn't your enemy? What if it's the doorway to something sacred? In this video, we're going to explore the hidden architecture of human suffering, and not to escape it, but to finally understand it. You'll discover how spirituality, philosophy, and deep self-awareness can reveal the patterns that silently govern your desires, your sadness, your constant sense of lack. And once you see it, you can begin to free yourself from it. If you're here, it's because something inside you is already awakening. A part of you knows there's more to life than what meets the eye, that there is a mystical universe within, waiting to be remembered. So stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see your entire life. And before we begin, just one thing. Many people watch our videos and feel deeply connected, but aren't subscribed yet. If this kind of content speaks to your soul, to your search for meaning, depth, and spiritual clarity, then subscribe now to Celestial Truths. This journey is only beginning, and you don't want to miss what comes next. There is a silent ache woven into the fabric of human life. Most try to escape it, numb it, fight it, deny it. But those who walk the path of inner truth must ask a different question. What if this suffering is not a mistake, but the very structure of existence itself? According to Schopenhauer, the universe doesn't torment us out of cruelty. It simply reflects the primal laws of being. Suffering is not the exception, it is the rule. And when we stop running from it, something mystical begins to unfold. We start to see that every longing, every dissatisfaction is a doorway and not a prison, leading inward toward the vast terrain of the self. From a spiritual lens, suffering reveals the hidden currents that move beneath the surface of our lives. It is the language the universe uses to awaken us from the trance of superficial pleasures. One might think of desire as a flame that can never be satisfied. As soon as one wish is granted, another takes its place. This endless chase is not a failure of the soul, but a mirror of what Schopenhauer called the will, the blind, insatiable force behind all existence. This will is not rational, it does not negotiate. It only wants again and again, propelling us forward in a cycle of hunger and fleeting gratification. And we, unconscious of this mystical machinery, mistake it for our true self. Yet beneath this cycle lies something more. Carl Jung believed that suffering holds a symbolic function. It brings unconscious content to light. When we find ourselves trapped in repetitive disappointment, in love, in career, in self-image, we're not being punished, we're being called. These moments are sacred invitations from the deeper universe within. When the soul is ready, the pain becomes a teacher. It whispers, "You are not this ache. You are the one who observes it." And so begins the mystical shift, from identification with the suffering to witnessing it from a space of inner silence. To embrace this shift, one must practice the art of reflection, not through logic or reason, but through inner presence. Keep a journal not to solve the pain, but to sit with it like an old friend. Pay attention to the patterns in your dreams. They are messages from the symbolic universe of the unconscious. Let the silence speak in meditation, not silence as absence, but silence as revelation. There you may begin to sense that the dissatisfaction you feel is not merely psychological, it is existential. It is the human soul sensing that something essential has been forgotten. And yet, this realization does not bring despair, it brings clarity. Because once you see that suffering is embedded into the design of life, you no longer expect perfection from the outer world. You stop demanding that happiness be constant or that desires ever fully quench. Instead, you begin the mystical journey inward, guided not by hope of escape, but by the willingness to see, to witness, to awaken. And it's there, in the quiet space beyond craving, that the next truth reveals itself. The will that drives all things is not what it seems. What if behind every thought, behind every heartbeat, there was a force you couldn't see, but that moved everything? Schopenhauer called it the will, not your personal willpower or conscious desire, but a deeper primal current, a blind, relentless drive that doesn't ask why, only how do I keep going? It's the mystical pulse of existence itself, not guided by logic, not tamed by purpose, just pure, insatiable movement. And if you pay close enough attention, you'll sense it, not only in your cravings and ambitions, but in the way the entire universe breathes, reaches, and strives. This will isn't something you control. It is something you are part of. In the mystical teachings hidden within ancient philosophies, there is often mention of a serpent, not evil, but primal, a symbol of energy coiled at the base of all being, waiting to rise. That serpent is the will. It is not rational. It does not follow moral codes. It simply wants. And through this wanting, it manifests form after form, lifetime after lifetime. Schopenhauer dared to look at this force without the veil of optimism. He saw clearly, the will is not a friend to our comfort. It is the architect of our restlessness, the hidden puppeteer. And once we realize we are being pulled by something deeper than our conscious minds, we begin to awaken to the true nature of our suffering and of our spiritual path. Carl Jung echoed this insight. Through the language of the unconscious, he understood that this force lives beneath the ego, beyond the surface of our identities. It is irrational, dreamlike, archetypal, like the shadows that appear in dreams to shake us awake. You can't argue with the will. You can only observe its patterns and learn to walk beside it with reverence. The more you resist its flow, the more chaotic your inner world becomes. But if you approach it with humility, it may become a guide. In this way, the will is both danger and opportunity, a sacred paradox wrapped in the fabric of existence. Think of how a tree reaches toward the light, not because it decides to, but because it must. Or how water flows downhill, not out of choice, but due to the laws etched into the very structure of reality. The same principle applies to you. Every decision you make, from the person you fall in love with to the goals you chase, may be less yours than you think. They may be expressions of the will acting through you. This truth, while unsettling, can also be liberating, because if the will is the force beneath all things, then your suffering isn't proof that you're broken. It's proof that you're alive, moving in rhythm with a mysterious cosmic tide. And so we must ask, how do we live in alignment with a force that cannot be reasoned with? The answer perhaps lies not in fighting it, but in witnessing it. Through dream work, shadow integration, symbolic meditation, and synchronicity tracking, we begin to see where the will expresses itself in our lives. We begin to differentiate between the voice of the ego and the whisper of the universe. This is not about control, it is about awareness. The moment you step back and say, "Ah, I see you," the mystical game changes, and from that stillness, we begin to understand the deeper prison that awaits, the one built from endless desire. There is a quiet lie we are taught to believe, that fulfilling our desires will finally bring us peace. Yet every time we reach what we longed for, a strange emptiness returns. That new job, that relationship, that achievement, once so glowing in the distance, quickly fades, and something else takes its place. This is not failure. This is the nature of desire itself. It does not end. It only transforms like a serpent shedding its skin, only to grow another. In the mystical view of Schopenhauer, desire is not a path to happiness. It is the chain that binds us to suffering. And the more we chase, the tighter it wraps around our soul. Desire is born from lack, from a space within us that whispers, something is missing, and so we chase. But the universe has its own way of teaching. It does not give us everything we want because it loves us. It withholds, redirects, delays, because it wants us to awaken. Each unfulfilled longing is a message in disguise, a spiritual compass pointing inward. Jung called this the call of the self. When life refuses to satisfy the ego, it is often because the deeper self is asking for something else entirely. wholeness, not gratification. And we only begin to hear that call when the noise of desire quiets down. Still, most people live trapped in the illusion that the next thing will complete them. It's a mystical mirage, always shimmering on the horizon but never quite real, like a dream that dissolves the moment we try to hold it. This cycle can be seen everywhere, in consumer culture, in obsessive relationships, in the constant need for validation. But what if this prison isn't made of iron bars but of thoughts, projections, and stories we were never meant to believe? When we become aware of this, a doorway opens. Not out, but through. The path to freedom begins in observation, not judgment, not suppression, but sacred witnessing. Ask yourself, what am I chasing right now? And what feeling do I think it will give me? Often you'll find that beneath every desire is a deeper yearning for love, for meaning, for spiritual connection with the universe. But when you name the deeper need, the craving begins to lose its grip. Practices like dream journaling, mindful solitude, and symbolic meditation can help reveal the archetypes behind your desires. Are you chasing the lover, the hero, the savior? Each has something to teach, and if you dare to listen. And so, the seeker must understand, to desire is human, but to be ruled by desire is to sleepwalk through life. The more you identify with the wanting, the further you drift from your center. But when you stop running, when you sit quietly with your hunger and ask it what it truly seeks, the prison begins to crack, and through that crack, light enters. A new awareness arises, and with it, the glimpse of a deeper truth. You were never truly separate to begin with. There is a veil draped over our eyes, a soft, shimmering illusion that makes each of us believe we are separate. Separate from one another, from nature, from the divine intelligence of the universe. Schopenhauer, influenced by ancient mystical teachings like the Upanishads, called this veil Maya, the illusion of multiplicity. What you call you is not truly separate from what you call the other. Beneath the masks of identity, we are all expressions of one vast blind will, reaching, striving, existing. The individual self is a wave that thinks it is the ocean. But it is the ocean, always has been, always will be. This illusion is not a failure of perception, it is a necessary dream, one we must eventually wake up from. In the spiritual traditions of both East and West, the path of awakening is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before you were told your name. The ego wants to define itself, to say, this is me, this is mine, this is what I believe. But the mystical soul whispers something far more expansive. You are not this role you play. You are the consciousness beneath it. The same force that pulses in the stars moves through your breath. The universe is not out there. It's within, waiting to be seen. Carl Jung called this inner unity the self, the totality that includes both light and shadow, the personal and the collective. When we identify only with the ego, we feel small, isolated, threatened by the world. But when we begin to see ourselves as part of something greater, a cosmic intelligence, a living mystery, the boundaries begin to soften. You begin to notice synchronicities, messages from the unconscious subtle patterns that remind you. The universe speaks in symbols, not sentences. And if you slow down, become still, you can hear it. But make no mistake, the illusion of individuality is seductive. It flatters you with autonomy, promises of control, the thrill of being special. Yet this very illusion is what feeds separation, suffering, and spiritual disconnection. It is what makes us feel alone in crowded rooms, lost in our own thoughts, exiled from belonging. The mystical work, then, is to dissolve this illusion, not through force but through inner alignment, through practices that connect you to the whole: meditation, dream decoding, intuitive writing, the silent gaze into nature. In those moments the illusion trembles, and what remains is presence. And so the seeker begins to see, not through the eyes of the ego but through the vision of the soul. There is no true other, no true self as we define it, only reflections of the same will, clothed in different forms, acting out different stories in the grand theater of the universe. The more deeply you feel this truth, the more compassion arises, not as a moral duty, but as a natural consequence of inner recognition. And once this veil is pierced, a deeper question arises. If we are all one, then why is life still filled with so much conflict? And where does this conflict truly come from? Even after we awaken from the illusion of separateness, one truth remains. Existence is not peaceful. It is movement, tension, struggle. The mystical harmony of the universe is not a static calm. It is a dance of opposing forces. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. Beneath the surface of nature, behind the elegance of the stars, lies a ceaseless battle for continuation. Every form of life, from the smallest insect to the most complex human mind, is entangled in a struggle to survive, to assert, to reproduce. This isn't personal. It's the law of being, and it touches everything. Conflict, then, is not a mistake. It is embedded in the design. We like to think that suffering is caused by immoral choices or broken systems, but Schopenhauer invites us to look deeper. Conflict is not simply a product of culture. It is cosmic, structural, mystical. Even the most spiritual beings are touched by it. The ego wants to label good, bad, right, wrong. But the will moves beyond these categories. It pushes all forms into friction. The predator and the prey, the hero and the villain, the lover and the abandoned, all are expressions of a single energetic principle. And when we resist this truth, we increase our suffering. When we understand it, we begin to see the hidden balance of the universe. Carl Jung spoke of the inner conflict as a mirror of the outer world. Every war out there is a projection of the war within. The conflict between our instincts and our ideals, between our desires and our conscience, between the shadow and the persona, all these inner tensions are the soil from which individuation grows. To truly evolve, one must descend into these paradoxes, not escape them. It is in the fire of inner contradiction that the gold of the self is forged. Spirituality, then, is not an escape from the world's chaos. It is the mystical capacity to hold the opposites and transform through them. Think of the universe as a vast organism where every part competes and cooperates at once. The lion must kill to live. The tree must push against gravity to grow. And you must face your fears, your rejections, your wounds, not because you're broken, but because that is how the soul expands. Life tests us through conflict, not as punishment, but as alchemy. The friction you feel is the sacred tension that awakens your consciousness. It breaks the illusions, burns the false identities, and brings you closer to your essence. In this light, even pain becomes meaningful, even struggle becomes sacred. And still, within this ever-turning wheel of survival and suffering, there are moments, rare, fleeting but real, when the will is quieted, when time slows down and beauty pierces through the noise. These are not accidents. They are invitations, glimpses of another dimension of existence where the will holds still, if only for a heartbeat. Through art, through silence, through awe, we touch something beyond conflict, and it is there, in that mystical breath of stillness, that we begin to understand the refuge waiting for us in the next revelation. In the midst of life's constant ache, the noise of desire, the battle of survival, the haunting pull of the unconscious, there exist brief sanctuaries, not places, but states of being, moments where the will is no longer tugging at us, where the hunger inside quiets down and something timeless emerges. Schopenhauer understood this as the mystical power of aesthetic experience. When we lose ourselves in a painting, in a piece of music, in the stillness of the stars, we step outside the wheel of craving. For a moment, we are not subjects driven by lack. We are observers, witnesses of pure form, and in that act of seeing, of hearing, of feeling, we become whole. These moments are not permanent. They are delicate, fleeting, like whispers from the universe reminding us of something we've forgotten. But in them lies a truth deeper than words, that spirituality is not always found in answers, but in presence. Contemplation, true contemplation, is an act of surrender. It is choosing to be with what is, without changing it. Whether through art, poetry, or the silent rhythm of nature, we are pulled beyond the rational mind into a mystical awareness, an awareness that doesn't explain but reveals. And in that revelation, the self takes a breath. Carl Jung often spoke of the symbolic function of beauty. He knew that when we are moved by something, deeply, inexplicably, it is the unconscious responding to a pattern it recognizes, archetypes, myth, sacred geometry. These are not aesthetic choices. They are ancient languages of the soul. When you stand before a sculpture that brings tears to your eyes, or lose yourself in a melody that dissolves time, what you're experiencing is not just emotion, it's memory, not of the mind, but of the spirit. A mystical remembrance of your place in the vast, interconnected tapestry of the universe. The danger lies in mistaking these moments for solutions. They are not the end of suffering. They are pauses, sacred interludes in the drama of life. The will still waits beyond the gallery door. The hunger returns after the music fades, but something inside you changes. You begin to understand that these experiences are not escapes, but insights. They remind you that another way of being is possible, one not ruled by desire or fear. A life rooted in inner silence, spiritual presence, and mystical communion with what is. These glimpses are not fantasy. They are prophecy, signs of a deeper potential within. And so the seeker learns to cherish these spaces, to seek not constant pleasure but sacred rhythm, to find beauty not only in the masterpieces of others but in the way sunlight hits a window or how a single sentence in a forgotten book unlocks the heart. These are not luxuries, they are doorways, and through them we begin to intuit that perhaps the only true liberation is not in the world of form at all, but in the quiet refusal to want, in a mystical turning inward toward the silence that follows when the will is finally renounced. There comes a moment on the path where beauty, love, and even meaning cease to satisfy, not because they are false, but because they are still part of the game of form, of craving, of identity. Schopenhauer, like the mystics of ancient spiritual traditions, saw beyond the cycle of desire and temporary peace. He pointed towards something radical, a complete renunciation of the will to live, not as an act of despair, but as an act of profound clarity, to refuse the endless chase, to dissolve the craving at its root, to choose stillness over striving. This is not about suicide of the body, it is the mystical death of the ego. Such renunciation requires courage few are willing to embody, because it means letting go of everything the ego clings to, ambition, pleasure, recognition, even the illusion of romantic love. It is an ascetic path, not necessarily of robes and rituals, but of inner detachment, a conscious decision to no longer participate in the hunger that drives the world. From a spiritual perspective, this is not coldness, it is compassion in its most expansive form. When the self dissolves, what remains is not nothingness, but a deeper, boundless presence, a mystical communion with the universe beyond identity. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the integration of all parts of the psyche, including the shadow, until the ego loosens its grip. But what Schopenhauer suggested goes one step further, not integration, but transcendence, a movement past the personal altogether. And here lies the paradox: only those who have faced their desires fully can renounce them. You cannot transcend what you have not first acknowledged. So this isn't about repression, it's about witnessing desire clearly, honoring its power and then gently releasing it, like a leaf falling in autumn, not forced, just surrendered. This kind of ethical renunciation is echoed in mystical paths across cultures. In Zen, it is the practice of non-attachment. In certain schools of alchemy, it is the stage of mortificatio, the symbolic death before rebirth. And in the spiritual unfolding of one's own life, it might appear as a phase of solitude, withdrawal, a quiet retreat from noise. It is often misunderstood. People may call it apathy, depression, or escapism, but those who have touched this silence know it is not escape, it is return. A return to what is unchanging, beneath all desire, a return to the sacred stillness of the self. And so the seeker begins to taste a different kind of freedom, not the freedom to choose, but the freedom from choice, a space where the will is not repressed, but transcended, where nothing is missing, because nothing is needed. It is in this mystical state that the soul rests, not in bliss, but in profound silence. And from this silence, a final insight begins to form. Perhaps there is no salvation as we imagined. Perhaps, instead of being saved, we are meant to see clearly. To awaken, not to comfort, but to truth. There's a kind of wisdom that doesn't soothe. It sears. It doesn't promise salvation or a happy ending. Instead, it offers something far more rare: lucidity. The clarity that emerges when the illusions dissolve and we see life not as we wish it to be, but as it truly is. Schopenhauer's gift was precisely this: the refusal to sugarcoat reality. For him, truth wasn't found in uplifting fantasies or idealized futures. It lived in the raw observation of suffering, of futility, of endless craving. And yet, strangely, this lucidity held its own form of spirituality, a mystical light that glows not in the heavens, but in the acceptance of what is. This is the stage of the seeker's path where the comfort of false hope is replaced by the depth of self-awareness. You no longer need life to fulfill your expectations. You allow it to unfold in its mysterious, imperfect beauty. You begin to see how every loss carved space for wisdom, how every heartbreak revealed the contours of your inner world. The mystical universe is not a place of guarantees. It is a mirror. And the more clearly we look into it, the more we recognize our own patterns, our projections, our attachments, our fears. Lucidity, then, is not coldness. It is sacred witnessing, a form of silent compassion. Carl Jung understood that the deepest transformations do not come from avoiding the darkness, but from entering it consciously. To become lucid is to turn on the light within the dream, to walk awake in a world of sleepwalkers. It means understanding that you may never be free in the way the ego imagines, but you can be awake. You can live with eyes open, heart grounded, soul aligned with the pulse of the mystical universe. There is no need to pretend that life is gentle. It's enough to see that you are strong enough to walk through it without closing yourself. This clarity does not reject beauty, love, or joy. On the contrary, it deepens them. Because when you are no longer addicted to comfort, you stop clinging. And when you stop clinging, you can finally feel the wind against your skin, the silence between words, the fragile kindness in someone's eyes. These small moments become sacred, not because they last, but because you are present, fully, without filters, without expectation. That is spirituality in its purest form, not the promise of escape, but the mystical experience of being fully here, fully now, even amidst the ache of existence. And so we arrive not at a conclusion, but at a still point, a quiet pause in the spiral of becoming. Schopenhauer does not offer redemption, only revelation. But perhaps that is enough, because once you have truly seen, you cannot unsee. And in this seeing you are changed, no longer seeking comfort, no longer fighting truth, just breathing, aware, open. And from this inner silence, something new can begin. So now I ask you, what are you still chasing? What is the silent hunger that keeps whispering beneath your thoughts? Share it in the comments, not just for me, but for yourself. Naming what you carry is the first step to freeing yourself from it. If this video helped you see even a glimpse of truth, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to Celestial Truths and activate the notifications, because this channel is a space for seekers, for those walking the mystical path of self-awareness and spiritual transformation. And there's much more to uncover. The next video that's about to appear on your screen will take you even deeper. Don't miss it. You are not alone on this journey. With presence and reverence, Celestial Truths.